A very warm welcome to everyone today on Wednesday, the 9th of February 2022. You're joining us at the Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole Council's Cabinet meeting. Welcome to everyone that's joining us both physically and virtually on all of the various forums. I will go straight into agenda item 1, which is apologies. We have a number of apologies today, mainly due to people having to self-isolate through government guidance and legislation. So the apologies I have in front, and many of these people are actually still joining us virtually, although we'll be able to take part, but just not formally vote in the items. We have apologies from. Bear me a second, we've just got some feedback. Beverly? Apologies. There we are. We have formal apologies from Councillor Drew Mellor, who is joining us virtually. We also have apologies from Bobby Dove, who is at a police and crime panel meeting, other council business today. We also have apologies from Councillors Mike and Nicola Green, who again are joining us virtually and will still be taking part in the discussion. And I think we also have apologies from a number of the lead members who are on other council business, notably Councillors Barron and Johnson. Are there any apologies that I've missed? Nope. In which case, as I've said, and you will be still joined by many of those members as part of the discussion today, but they will not be able to vote if they are joining us virtually due to the world that we're in at the moment. So could I pass over to Sarah for some housekeeping remarks?
Thank you. Please note that this meeting of the Cabinet is being recorded by the Council for live broadcast and will be published on the Council website for a minimum of 6 months. Please could everyone present follow these ground rules. Only speak when invited to by the Chairman. If accessing via Teams, always turn on your video function when invited to speak and state your name. Please use your microphones when speaking, and please mute or turn off your microphone when you're not talking. If accessing via Teams and you would like to speak on an item, please do so by utilising the raise your hand feature in the bar at the top of the Teams window. For those in the room, please note that if the fire alarm sounds, please exit the building by way of the nearest available signed fire exit route and make your way to the ground floor of the multi-storey car park. And finally, please ensure background noise is kept to a minimum and mobile phones and other devices are turned off or switched to silent for the duration of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And it was remiss of me to mention that because the leader is only joining us virtually today, I'll be chairing the meeting formally today as Deputy Leader. We've had item 1 already, apologies. Before we move on to item 2, declarations of interest, I'd also like today to welcome in the room with us two of our new officers in the council, Jess Gibbons, who's joined us as our Chief Operating Officer. Thank you very much. Welcome, Jess. And also Kathy Hadley, who's our Director of Children's Services as well. So you're very, very welcome and thank you for joining us today. Let's move to item number 2 with declarations of interest. Sarah, have we received any declarations of interest? Any declarations from the room? Nope. Thank you very much. In which case we will go on to item number 3, confirmation of minutes, to confirm the and sign the correct record of the minutes of the meeting held on the 12th of January 2022. I'm happy to, first of all, are there any comments on those or amendments? Nope. In which case I'm happy to propose. Can I have a seconder? Councillor White, thank you very much. All those, are we all happy to accept those minutes? It's unanimous. Thank you very much. And then we will move on to item number 4. I'm advised that we've got no statements or petitions that have been submitted, but we do have a question that has been submitted by a member of the public relating to agenda item 6, the corporate strategy, and agenda item 7, which is the budget and medium-term financial plan. Sarah, are you reading out the question? Thank you very much.
The question comes from Sue Chapman, and as already identified, relates to agenda item 6, the corporate strategy, and agenda item 7, the budget and medium-term financial plan. And the question is, councillors rightly praise young Izzy for her tree planting Jubilee campaign. Unfortunately, as the gas chambering of our atmosphere amounts to a terrifying 420 ppm CO2, Izzy's generation are not being advised on how they salvage and survive the frightening impacts predicted. Repair cafes, a zero carbon, zero waste programme and respect for the living world should be prioritised and advertised in libraries and leaflets. Please could BCP's funding focus incentivise our natural assets, turn from deadly fossil fuels and concreting over vanishing wildlife, while investing in renewables, backing community growing schemes, regenerative agriculture and a circular economy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. And I believe Councillor Mike Green will be answering the question. Councillor Green.
Thank you very much, Chairman, and apologies that I can't be with you in person today. I'd like to thank Mr. Chapman for her suggestions, which will, I'm sure, be considered alongside others as we progress towards our twin aims of the Council's own operations becoming carbon neutral by 2030 and the whole BCP area becoming carbon neutral by 2050 at latest. With the doubling of the money available to spend on climate action contained within the Council budget being proposed today, and the game-changing announcement of up to £20 million capital for a Green Futures Fund, there can be no doubt that the Council is far better prepared and better placed to achieve our aims than could possibly have been imagined before the Conservatives took responsibility in late 2020. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. I'll now move on to agenda item number 6, which is recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board, which are not otherwise on the agenda. We have a couple from Overview and the main Overview and Scrutiny Board, and also a couple of recommendations from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Board. So I'll go to the Overview and Scrutiny Board first, and I believe Councillor Bartlett is joining us, Chairman. And would you like to present those recommendations? Thank you, Chairman.
Yeah, good morning, Cabinet. Yeah, you will recall that on the 5th of January, the Overview and Scrutiny Board held a climate emergency inquiry day. Unfortunately, we ran out of time. It was such a long debate, but we did put some recommendations together on our following meeting on the 5th of January. I think it's fair to say that overall we were really appreciative of the fact that, you know, the progress on the climate emergency had been slowed because of the pandemic, clearly, pressures on staff, and there were some really difficult times for the team to work through. I think there was a recognition that there's some really good work that's been done, and I think the board appreciated that. But I think the focus was more on what we can now do moving forward, and so the recommendation that the board came up with was more of a sort of guidelines for the sorts of things that we would like to see coming forward. And it's rather a long sort of recommendation. I hope you'll bear with me, but basically this is what it says. The Overview and Scrutiny Board resolved that the Cabinet be recommended to note the Overview and Scrutiny Board's A. Appreciation and acknowledgement of the work carried out by officers for the period of the annual report, particularly with regard to the reduction in CO2. B. Recognition that the climate team is not yet fully staffed and that the resources available to date have limited the development of some aspects of the climate emergency strategy, plans and tasks. C. Welcome of the additional investment to expand the climate emergency team, and in particular, the appointment of a head of climate. D. Recognition and understanding that it will take some time for the new climate team to be recruited and for it to become fully effective. E. Expectation that a BCP climate emergency strategic policy and risk assessment will be developed, from which an implementation plan is produced that clearly details how the strategic policy is to be achieved. The plan should provide SMART objectives and describe the organisation and organisational responsibilities for achieving these. The strategy, risk assessment and implementation plan should cover both the 2030 Council targets and the 2050 national targets, and should apply to aspects that are directly under the control of the Council and those within the greater BCP area, where the Council can lead, facilitate and promote the climate emergency through its relationships with organisations, businesses, industry, other partnerships and local residents. It is also requested that the Head of Climate start a programme of member seminars and climate literacy training for all staff. F. Expectation the climate actions are supported with local data where possible to ensure actions are not skewed by the use of misleading national data. Data should include an assessment of emissions of council employees working from home, and this should be included within the council's emissions footprint. G. Expectation that the existing climate action plan, i.e. the task list, is further developed to include all requirements of the implementation plan. And H. Intention to further consider the council's progress towards meeting its climate emergency aims at a meeting in September 2022. So that was the main recommendation emerging from the inquiry day, Chairman. And we did have another item on the agenda, which was the BCP surface water runoff and sewer outflows.
Councillor Bartlett, before we move on to the second recommendation, I'll just turn to Councillor Mike Green. I know, and I thank the board for their work on this and the notes contained within that recommendation. I know during the meeting, Councillor Green was very accepting of the spirit in which they were pushed forward. But I just wanted to defer to Councillor Green if you had any further comments.
Yeah, thank you very much, Chairman. I'd also like to thank the Overview and Scrutiny Board and under Councillor Bartlett's chairmanship for the analysis that was done and the amount of time that was spent on going through the climate action report. I think it was a unanimous feeling of how important the action is to us as a council. Before just going on to the recommendations or the items for note that Councillor Bartlett's come out with, I think I'd just like to clarify one item, which was the recognition that Councillor Bartlett pointed out beforehand about the difficulties that have been faced by the climate action team and the delays that have taken place. I don't think it's quite fair to say that that's been because of the pandemic and because of the national situation. The delays that have taken place are fairly and squarely down to the fact that the funding was unfortunately withdrawn under the previous administration for the climate action work. There was £240,000 in that budget, and when that came out of it, that left the climate team unable to expand, unable to recruit, and unable to get on with the work. We are now through that. As we know, the money has been put back into the budget, and there'll be more about that later. But that was the reason that that we are behind schedule. But luckily, I think rapidly catching up now. As you mentioned, Mr. Chairman, we're very supportive of the work that was done and the notes that have been put forward, and within these recommendations or with these items to note A to H. And it's very much in the way that we're going, and I think actually these notes are helpful in putting a sort of corset on that, so we can see and mark off how we are progressing. The one exception that I would make is in item F, where the second part of that asks that data should include assessment of emissions of council employees working from home, and this should be included within the council's emissions footprint. Certainly within the BCP area, those emissions need to be included. However, industry standards at the moment, and we've been very careful to try to ensure that our reporting follows that best practice, do not ask for the for data emissions of council employees working from home to be included within council's own emissions, and the same would be true, I understand, for other employers around the country. But what we will do is we'll very carefully watch those industry standards as they emerge and develop, and we'll make sure that we comply with them. So if there is a change in the way that industry, way that the rest of the world wants to look at this, then we'll make sure that we do so at the first available opportunity as well. But that accepted, once again, if I can just thank the Overview and Scrutiny board for the work that they've done, and particularly Councillor Bartlett for putting these notes together. And very happy to be noting all of those with that minor exception. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green, for those commitments as well. Councillor Bartlett, can I invite you to present the second recommendation?
Yes, thank you very much, Chair. This was related to the surface water runoff and sewage overflows, which has been in the news a lot recently. And we invited the Environment Agency and Wessex Water to give a couple of presentations with the aim of helping us to understand what the actual situation on the ground in our area was. It was a very informative discussion, we came up with a recommendation, but this too specifically to the portfolio holder. But just for information, I'll read it out to you today. The following recommendation was made to the portfolio holder, but included for information today. The Overview and Scrutiny Board resolved that the relevant portfolio holder be recommended to write to all BCP MPs and Ofwat expressing BCP's concerns, Council's concerns on the level of use of combined sewerage overflows and the effect of this on both bathing water quality and the shell fishing industries, requesting that they lobby government for legislation to be improved and action taken to address what are currently unacceptable water quality levels. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett, and I'll invite the portfolio holder, Councillor Mark Anderson, to respond to the recommendation.
Thank you, Chairman. I also like to thank the Owners Board for their interest and the debate which took part at their last meeting, which explained to more of the councillors about the issues involved with this area. However, I have already written to the MPs about this subject. I've already had, as I mentioned, arranged a meeting with the MPs to discuss the issues and to discuss Ofwat. I've set up and chaired meetings between the Wessex Water and Environment Agency with a wide range of interested parties. I've had discussions with the chairman of the Dorset catchment area on this, and therefore, because it's superfluous, I won't be accepting the recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson, and I'm pleased to see that you're ahead of the game and had already done what was asked of you in the recommendation before the meeting even. So thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett. We'll be hearing from you, I think, a little later. There's one further recommendation relating to the budget, so I'll bring you in at that point, if I may. Colleagues, I'll now move on to the second set of recommendations, which come from the Health and Adult Social Care Overview and Scrutiny Committee, which was held on the 17th of January. I believe we have two, and we've got the chair of the Health Overview and Scrutiny Committee, Councillor Jackie Edwards. Welcome, Jackie. Could I ask you to present the first of those recommendations? Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and good morning to everybody. Just a little bit of background. There are many informal carers in the BCP area, caring for people who have from basic to fairly full-on caring. I won't go into all the criteria you need to receive the carer's allowance, but you have to provide at least 35 hours a week of care. The allowance is £67.60 a week, which works out at £1.93 an hour. You don't get extra money if you care for more than one person, and it stops when you receive your pension. With the shortage of formal carers, some may have thought to take on the caring for their family members, but simply can't afford to give up their own jobs. So the recommendation is, the committee agreed for the chair to ask the Cabinet to write to the local MPs, asking them to review the informal carers allowance, which currently stands at £67.60 a week, with a view to increasing it.
Thank you very much, Councillor Edwards, for that recommendation. Fortunately, we have a lead member whose responsibilities are squarely aimed at the carers and the caring community. So I'll pass over to our lead member in this area, Councillor Lawrence Fear, to respond. Thank you, Lawrence.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I'd just like to thank Councillor Edwards and the committee for bringing these recommendations. Members of the public and other members, I always encourage to go to this committee because it's so important and it is very interesting. If I may just say, the push from us as a local authority, this is one of our top priorities as looking at carers. And why it is so is because of not only the knock-on effect from COVID, but it is prior to that. And this is why we take this issue very seriously. And that is why we are pushing through with a carer strategy. And this has been a broad team effort down from the leader of the council, cabinet members, officers, myself, and other members of the authority. And this is why on the 22nd of February, I'll be inviting all members to the carer strategy seminar. So we have feed-in, and this is where we can have these points taken up as an authority. So we'll be able to directly feed into our strategy, feedback to officers, which I feel will be a really good way of looking at this particular part that Councillor Edwards has raised. Furthermore on this, I'd just like to add, as we see later on in this meeting, we have the budget proposals and other budget matters. But one thing I would like to say is that down to the hard work of, again, the leader of the council, cabinet members, myself working with officers, we found a portion of money that will go to that we will be teaming up with Carers UK. So that will involve a portal not only for staff members but thousands of BCP residents will be able to take advantage of this for free. I'm more than happy to talk about that at a later date, but I just wanted to demonstrate the fact that we have the carer strategy, which we will be able to feed in these points, and we also take in further measures as well to support carers out in the community. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Fear, and brilliant to hear that there's a wider strategy around this, and look forward to all members getting properly involved in that, because it's really important. It's great that you've got a plan for that. I'll invite Councillor Edwards to present the second of your recommendations. Thank you, Jackie.
Yes, thank you. On a slightly different note, there is a shortage of paid formal care staff. We are competing against other local industries who also have staff shortages. Our recommendation is BCP have a large number of care workers who look after our many elderly and vulnerable residents. We need to promote care work as an attractive career, including through apprenticeships, with on-the-job skill training, which offer real career progression. As valued workers, they should be seen as key workers with a fair wage and all the benefits for the essential service they provide. Will Cabinet approve and help pursue this course of action? Thank you.
Thank you again, Councillor Edwards, both you and your committee. I believe Councillor Karen Rampton will be responding to this one. Thank you, Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Councillor Edwards and committee for bringing this recommendation to Cabinet. I just wanted to just mention a few of the things that we do as BCP Council to support our valued care workers. We have an ICS, Integrated Care System, scholarship programme with a social care cohort, and that's commencing this April or May. We've launched a recruitment campaign via a third-party production company for the whole market, including care homes. We have ongoing subsidised school holiday childcare offer to providers who are on our framework, our adult social care framework. We offer free e-bike hire and free parking permits if care workers have to go to sort of areas in the BCP which are quite difficult to get parking spaces in. We've had the government-funded workforce recruitment and retention funds, and 85% has been allocated to our providers for recruitment and retention measures. We're intending to do provider engagement events quarterly over the next 12 months. And in addition, we're planning a domiciliary care workforce task force with our providers, and we've got our first meeting next month, which is great. And of course, we've got our Proud to Care Awards, and we had a spread in the Echo quite recently, and with the successful celebration of the people who received the awards. So I really hope that reassures you, Councillor Edwards. That's just a snapshot of what we do. There's a lot more, and Councillor Fear, of course, will know even more of what we're doing in future, including getting that co-production on our carer strategy and making sure that we're including
paid carers. It's not just for unpaid carers in that strategy. So we really value our care workers now and going forward. And they do provide such a vital role in supporting our more vulnerable people. So we intend to carry on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rampton, and thank you, Councillor Edwards, for presenting those recommendations today. And again, thank you for the continued work of the committee. That moves us on from that agenda item of recommendations from our overview and scrutiny boards. I'll then move into the agenda proper, and the first item we have is agenda item 6, which is the corporate strategy. What I intend to do, because we have a number of colleagues joining us virtually, many of whom are the authors and the presenters of these reports, I'll be formally proposing this one, seek a seconder, and then I'll move directly to, in this case, Councillor Mellor as leader to give us an introduction to the report. So I will formally propose the item. I believe, Councillor Mark Anderson, you wish to second?
Thank you, Chairman. I'm really pleased to second this paper as part of the corporate strategy, and I'm really pleased that we will be able to harmonise food waste as soon as the recent Environment Bill statutes are published and we are able to access them and decide how we're going to apply them. So I'm really pleased that it's coming in as part of the corporate strategy, and I look forward to being able to harmonise food waste across the whole of the conurbation.
Thank you very much, Councillor Anderson. I'll now pass to Councillor Mellor joining us virtually to introduce the item. Thank you, Councillor Mellor.
Yeah, thank you very much both for proposing and seconding what's a really collaborative and joint piece of work effectively. So just to be clear, so we inherited, when we became an administration, we inherited a corporate strategy that was relatively new, and what we did at the time, we made a decision that it wouldn't be the right for a new administration to come in and materially change that. It was a good corporate strategy that had been well consulted on, and we were happy to stand alongside it. What we've done since then is we wanted to effectively raise the level of ambition across our place, and that's what we did through our big plan document and initiative. That what we're now seeing in front of us today, and I want to thank all cabinet members and their officer teams for the real huge work that's gone into this, is integrated effectively that level of ambition through the big plan into our corporate strategy. So it's very similar in places to the document we inherited, but we believe it's tighter, it's more ambitious, and it's more directed at what are the real priorities of this council. So I'm very happy to effectively take any questions from members of cabinet on this. And anybody else here, but it's a great piece of work that Bridget and her team, Graham particularly, have led, Bridget Webber, so we really appreciate the amount of work that's gone into it, but happy to leave it there, Chair, and take any questions as you and the other members see fit.
Thank you very much, Leader. And in formally proposing and the hard work that's gone into this, it is it's not seismic changes, but it is very much geared to making sure that the operational side of the council can absolutely deliver on the priorities of this administration, and that's why it's absolutely key. Before I open up to colleagues not on the cabinet, I'll just see if the chairman of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, I don't believe there are any formal recommendations, whether there's any comments, Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, no, we have no formal recommendations. There were a couple of points raised regarding the monitoring of our progress on the corporate plan, and we talked about the need for a performance dashboard, and I think this was generally accepted by the leader at the time. There was also an issue about the need to improve our face-to-face consultation with residents, and again, this was the thing I think the leader accepted at the time. But other than that, I think the corporate strategy generally well received, and no formal recommendations. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bartlett. So I'll open up for any comments or questions from colleagues not on the cabinet that are joining us virtually. I'm not seeing any at this time. Thank you all. In which case, are there any comments or questions from those on Cabinet Plus, either virtually or physically? Not seeing any. again, very much a piece of work that's designed around ensuring that we can get on and deliver what we have absolutely promised to do. So with that, we have the formal recommendation in front of us in the Cabinet approve the updated corporate strategy. For those Cabinet members present, could I have all of those in favour? Thank you very much. That is unanimous. So we will move on to agenda item 7, which is the budget and medium-term financial plan, MTFP for 2022-23. And I will again formally propose this. I believe Councillor Dunlop will formally second, and then again pass over to the leader to introduce this item. Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Really keen and pleased to be able to bring this paper before you today. We had as I'm sure we'll hear shortly from the Chair of Overview of Scrutiny, we had a really good, and detailed debate at Overview of Scrutiny. What I'll do here first, if I may, Chair, is just talk about the, effectively what the paper says, key directions of travel, and then we'll open it up to any questions or comments. So what we've been able to do in this, in really challenging times across local government finance is to deliver through this paper a council tax, a core council tax free. So that's for 1.99%. We're allowed to effectively, the cap we're allowed to increase core council tax each year. We're freezing that. That's off the back of last year when we put forward the second lowest council tax rise in the country. And just to remind members, we deferred the full 3% of adult social care precept we could levy last year. Across these 2 years, that's over £11 million worth of council tax benefit this administration has been able to deliver across 2 budgets now, or will be able to deliver across 2 budgets now if this is accepted. So that's over £7 million last year deferred, and we thought £4 million recurring saved for our residents this year. What we're also doing is collecting in full the government's adult social care precept, which gives significant funds, for our most vulnerable in our communities. Just to give Cabinet colleagues, some background to that. That raises just over £8 million, and across children's and adults, this budget puts in over £25 million of investment into, just under £25 million of investment into adults and children. So significantly, more than 3 times the amount of the adult social care precept we're finding to invest in our most vulnerable, whilst keeping council tax, effectively frozen. So let's talk about some of the main parts of this. We've talked, and we're hearing more and more when we're looking into levelling up as a piece of work about pride, pride in place, pride in people's communities. We talked when we came in our 100-day plan, we had in our last budget, and we have significant further investment in this budget around cleaner, greener, safer. So that's our commitment to bring back pride in our place, and whether that's on the seafront and the fantastic work we saw this summer in what was delivered in comparison to previous summers, when it's a much better summer readiness plan, was enabled a better quality seafront, but also the pilots we've been doing in our main town centres. This gives us an extra £3 million on cleaner, greener, safer to go further, to embed that going forward, and puts in about £1.5 million of extra investment into the summer response. So that pride in place is absolutely at the front and centre of this budget. In that £3 million is a massive commitment for 10 extra community safety officers. So this is on top of the 6 community safety CSAS officers we brought in our last budget. So we've now we will have over funding for over 30 community safety officers working in tandem with the BIDs and the police. So we've actually got boots on the ground to really support our ambition around antisocial behaviour and delivering pride in our place. I mentioned briefly that we're bringing in over £12 million worth of children and young people's investment, over £12 million of adult and health investment effectively. So this very much is a budget, and we just heard from Councillor Fear around the carers and Councillor Rampton around that space. And this is putting real money into delivering on these priorities around children, care, and council tax. What the other, another thing we do materially in this, and thank you very much for Councillor Green earlier on for mentioning this, we talk about climate, and sustainability. So you'll note in the papers that this is bringing forward a massive, £20 million Green Futures Fund. So that's capital money we can invest to deliver the types of improvements and net zero ambitions that we have as a council that's declared a climate and ecological emergency. I will take the opportunity to really agree quite heartily, actually, with Councillor Green on two fronts. One, to thank Councillor Bartlett and his overview and scrutiny team for the detailed session on climate that we're able to enjoy, but also then to sort of the recommendations that's come forward. I think we do need to recognise that some of the slow pace, is actually of decisions of the previous administration when they did take out £240,000 a full budget effectively around climate. What we've done as an administration is we put it back. We've doubled it, then we've made it permanent, and now we're going even further. We're bringing forward not just the resource of people to deliver on our climate and ecological emergency promises, but we're now bringing in the capital investment to actually do something material with it. Chair, I think it's I'd like to also talk about transformation. I think that's a material part of why we're here as BCP Council, why a local government reorganisation happened. It's about that ambition of bringing the three preceding authorities together to create something that is genuinely world class and one of the most efficient and leading councils in the country. So what this budget also does, it puts significant investment, further investment into transformation, and then it goes further with the ambition for what we're trying to achieve through it. So to give some clarity to members, the target for transformation efficiency savings by the end of the medium-term financial period is in the region of £50 million, and that's £50 million a year of recurring savings we'll deliver for our council taxpayers year on year. So massively more ambition in terms of what we're trying to do in terms of efficiencies of the organisation and the quality of operation we can bring to people through being one of the most digitally enabled organisations in the country. One other really important thing we're doing, Chair, if I may, is talk about our approach to assets and to some extent the commercialisation of some of our assets. We spoke at length in opposition to, about it being the wrong policy from the previous administration around, we called it a fire sale of assets effectively. So how are we going to fund transformation? You had a choice: sell a lot of assets, sell buildings to fund it. One thing to do, we need to make sure our assets, we're committed to delivering more assets to our children and future generations than the assets we've inherited. So we stopped the fire sale. This budget stops the fire sale of assets, and by using our assets more commercially, and in this instance looking at the potential to use the future income streams around the beach huts. Or a number of the beach huts, to raise those funds that we can then bring in. So effectively £54 million that would be invested in transformation to deliver a £50 million a year saving. So that £54 million of securitisation on the beach hut income delivers in the lifetime of that, so 20 years of that, in the region of £1 billion for our council taxpayers, over £50 million a year through the transformation programme. It's while we're on that, Chair, I'll just talk briefly around around some of, we had a reasonable discussion at overview and scrutiny around beach huts in general. Probably helpful to just clarify now that what we're looking to do absolutely keeps the beach huts in the effective ownership of the council long term. So what the plan is to do is to set up a company which we would be in control of and permanently and forever in control of, that would be able to fulfil this obligation, fulfill this transaction. So at no point is there any risk around the council's losing control of the beach huts or control of their assets. It means that future generations will still be able to benefit from them. And there's actually nothing material that will be changing in terms of beach hut owners themselves. not owners, leaseholders for themselves. Other than potentially having significant more money, we'd have significant more capital to invest in terms of improving them quicker. So maintenance, better maintenance. Also looking at ways we can bring other commercial opportunities to bear to give different services to beach hut owners as well. So and any price rises going forward will be entirely at the council's discretion. So completely in control of that. Okay, let me just see, so effectively, I think I've probably presented this paper, in depth enough, Chair. So if I just summarise, we are massively high in investment and ambition. We are increasing the unearmarked reserves because we think that's really important to get a strong financial footing going forward. You'll see that through the course of the 5-year medium-term financial plan, certainly for the first time in my memory, we're getting towards a position of a balanced 5-year medium-term financial plan. So that, on top of the extra investment in unearmarked reserves, puts us in a really good financial footing going forward. We're looking at our assets more commercially, and we will continue to do that. We actually have significant wealth in our area, but we now need to just make sure we're utilising those assets to generate that investment in our place and investment in our council without going back to the council taxpayer to keep on funding it effectively. So we've kept £11 million over 2 years, or will have done in council taxpayers' pockets. I think that's really important at the moment when we have significant pressure on inflation, and we're in a pandemic environment. For the first time, certainly in my memory, more investment is going into children than any other directorate. So it's a budget for children, for care, for council tax, and for climate. A real budget now, for now, this generation now, and also future generations. So, Chair, I'm very, very happy to take any further questions. Apologies, I've gone on a little bit long there, but this is some real detail in here and a really material and important, part of our work package going forward. So, very, very happy to take any questions, and look forward to other members' comments. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Leader. And informally proposing, I'll just add a few comments of my own, which I may. You've covered all of the major points there, and this is a budget, isn't it, of huge investment and really high figures. But it is easy when you are looking at those large figures to forget what they actually mean to people on the ground. So that almost £25 million extra in-year investment on our children's and adult services is a big figure. But what that means is that we're putting an unprecedented amount of extra money into helping those in need across Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. And we all know, don't we, that these are difficult times. We're coming out of the pandemic. We're finding what the new normal is, and we've got energy prices rising. So the ability to have that laser focus on our most vulnerable to a level that we've never done before, I think will make an absolutely critical difference on the ground. You've talked about, I think, what I think is a really progressive policy of the council tax freeze for the main part of council tax that we control. It's absolutely right, like most authorities, to take the full social care precept that is earmarked and ring-fenced purely for those vulnerable people that we've talked about. But the quantum of the council tax that we have control over, to freeze that, I think, sends a very powerful message that we've got people's backs. And, that again, that £11 million, what does that mean? Well, it means that £11 million that could have been taken by the council is still in people's pockets over the last couple of years. And the fact that, as one of the largest urban authorities in the country, we're able to do that when nobody else can, I think, goes some way to showing our financial credibility as well. And again, those big figures around the investments that we're making into our place as well, I think, are absolutely critical. We took what we thought was a very bold move last year of putting 5.2 million into some of our really key priorities at the time, and the fact that we're now able to embed them this year as well. Things like our investment in regeneration, our cultural and arts strategy, and our community safety officers, that now has a level of permanence, so it was not just a one-off. And then the additional 8.2 million going into kind of things that are good, but where good is just not good enough and we want to go above and beyond. I think hopefully people will really start to see a difference on the ground, particularly that over 3 million additional investment in safer, making sure our streets are safe, they're clean, they're noticeably different. And then finally, the pothole patrol fund that we'll be having £600,000 extra into making sure that we've got that absolute focus on and getting all those potholes fixed. So I do think this is a budget that will absolutely make a difference on the ground to real people. And again, just to underline what that difference makes in various areas of Bournemouth, Christchurch and Poole. You take Christchurch as an example. Over the course of this council, had local government reorganisation not happened and Christchurch remained part of Dorset County Council, and they continued to face the rises that they were, already the average householder in Christchurch is about £260 per year better off than if things had stayed the same. And over the lifetime of the council, that's £1,000 extra just in Christchurch, so people are better off than if nothing had happened. So really proud that we've been able to do this, and also really proud that rather than focus on that service level improvement of the transformation that we've got to do on funding that by selling civic centres or car parks, we're absolutely focused on doing that by not selling things, but using our assets in a wise way whilst keeping that control, because I think that's absolutely critical. The beach hut estate in particular, as you've highlighted, right now we own the beach huts. In a year's time we'll continue to almost fully own the beach huts. Right now we make the decisions on the beach huts in terms of what investment we put in and what we charge. That will not change as well. So very much being able to keep hold of our assets whilst having that financial stability into the future. Colleagues, before I pass over to councillors outside the Cabinet and councillors on the Cabinet, we do have a recommendation from the Overview and Scrutiny board on this one. So I invite Councillor Bartlett to present that recommendation and then invite the leader back to respond to that, which I think is around what happens if the government changes their mind on flexible use of capital receipts. But I'll bring you in, Councillor Bartlett.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, given the political balance of the Overview and Scrutiny Board, it's hardly surprising that we had a very vigorous debate and a difference of opinion on each side about the general approach or the philosophy behind the budget. Now, because of that split, and inevitably these arguments will come up again in full council when the budget is voted on. I don't intend to go into the detail of all of those arguments now. But what I will say is that I guess one of the main focuses was basically what the cost of transformation is going to be. It seems to be escalating, and how that will be paid for. And there seems to be a real difference of approach there, particularly in relation to the level of borrowing and the use of reserves to that effect. So I'm not really going to say much more than that. But one issue that did come out specifically from the report, as the chairman has just said, was the use of flexible capital receipts. There was a sort of a caveat in the report saying that the government hadn't has yet to fully approve the extension of the use of flexible capital receipts. So there was a slight concern there, which is covered by the following recommendation. The Overview and Scrutiny Board recommend to Cabinet that the administration develops a Plan B in the event the government cancels or amends the flexible use of capital receipt regulations, leaving a hole of up to 54 million in the 2022-23 budget. Thank you, Chair. That's all I've got to say.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett. What I'll do is I'll bring the leader back in now to address those 2 points that you've raised. First of all, how are we on the borrowing? Where do we compare to others? Is this are we outliers? And secondly, around that confusion over where the government is on the extension of flexible use of capital receipts. Thank you, Councillor Miller.
Yeah, thank you, and thank Councillor Bartlett. It's a really long and in-depth session, wasn't it? And I enjoyed having the opportunity to discuss with members, the merits of this budget. In terms of the debt position, so we are actually an outlier in terms of debt. We're an outlier because we actually have one of the lowest levels of debt out of any authority of our size. I think we're just approaching the top of the bottom quartile or the bottom of the third quartile, effectively. So we have significantly less debt than other comparator authorities priorities. And we will continue to effectively. Our policy over the life of this medium-term financial plan is to not get any further than the median point of that as well. So we can we're committed to being a high investment, high ambition, low council tax, low debt and high reserves council by over that period of time getting above the median point in terms of unearmarked reserves. So hopefully that's helpful in terms of that. The point and the recommendation about Plan B, fully understand it. My understanding of that was it's very much in the paper as it is. Paper's quite clear, but it talks about that there will need to, if there is an issue in terms of flexible use of capital receipts, other options will need to be considered. A couple of things technically, there. That wouldn't be a £54 million issue in relation to purely this year, effectively. So that's not there. I mean, we talked at length about part of that 54 million is a £12 million transformation capital receipts reserve, effectively. And then this is about funding transformation over the life of the 4 years of the programme. The report also talks about material work going in terms of other ways of other commercial ways of looking at our assets, and so and even the one we're talking about it'd be relatively straightforward to move that through into a different route to recognise that return. So I can try and assure Councillor Bartlett that significant work has gone into this, both in terms of there being no expectations of issues around flexible use of capital receipts, but also alternate plans and flexibility. Ultimately, Chair, we have a huge asset base across the conurbation. It's our responsibility to do two things. One is to make sure that asset base is there for future generations to use, which is what we're doing. And I believe it's to actually look at that commercially as well, to say how we can utilise that asset base for this generation as well as future generations. And that's what we're doing. There are a myriad of ways to do that. This is just one of them. If there's an issue with this, we'll move forward with a different plan. So, Chair, I believe that were the two questions you wanted me to ask. I'm happy to come back if helpful.
Thank you, Councillor Mellor, for that answer, and again, thank you to the Overview and Scrutiny Board for that marathon run, as we would only expect when we are looking at the budget. I'll now move on to colleagues that are not on Cabinet. I have two indicating Councillor Cox and Councillor Deadman, so I'll come first to Councillor Cox. I'll then move to Councillor Deadman. I'll then move to colleagues who are on the Cabinet, and then I will leave it to Councillor Mellor to close the item. Councillor Cox.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hear the leader talk about this budget being high on investment and ambition. Unfortunately, it's far from that. It's actually high on risk, high on debt, and high on overspending. I wanted to highlight a few items that Cabinet needs to bear in mind when it thinks about this budget. And the first is regarding paragraph 1E, where it talks about risk. It does talk about the Cabinet having to have due regard for risk in the budget, and the section 25 report at the end of the budget, which is prepared by the section 151 officer, clearly screaming that no due regard has been made for the risk that lies within the massive risks that lie within this budget. Paragraph 28 also talks about the overspending, and it's only in the current year, which is only mitigated by one-off pieces of income which were not recurring, and this has not been dealt with by the administration. The flexible use of capital receipts, which we talk about, the budget clearly needs £42 million from the flexible use of receipts. And this is the only way that the Cabinet are doing this is by driving down value. It's not driving out value. And in terms of levelling up, which we had a seminar on yesterday, this is not levelling up anything. This is actually tearing generations apart by taking income from the future generations of this council and spending it today. And as for the touching reliance which the leader has on KPMG, a firm, of course, which has just been slammed with a claim of 1.9 billion, for its part in the Carillion disaster, and which a company, which I have to say, did participate in non-traditional, creative and dynamic accounting policies, which the leader seems to rely on significantly and trumpets. The projections for transformation to date have failed, and these are the KPMG projections of the savings that they're going to make. So I really want to know why is there such a touching reliance and acceptance of what KPMG say. And as for the reserves, which you seem to claim that we're fine on reserves. Well, we're not fine on reserves. We're bordering on going into negative. And if you include the designated schools grant, we are into negative. And it would only take a small adverse change in the government's policy, and that will mean that you will be faced with the Section 114 notice, which would be a disaster, not just for politically for you as a cabinet, but also disaster for all the people that rely on the services of the council. And finally, I just want to call out the doubling down of a lie, which you continually seem to trumpet, almost parroting Boris Johnson by saying that the last administration got rid of £250,000 worth of climate change. It didn't. If you look at your own report, this is your own report, in your own handwriting, paragraph 12 clearly says it was deferred. And Councillor Green and the leader, continually parrot this lie that the previous administration cut it. It didn't cut it. It simply deferred it because at the time we were at the beginning of a pandemic, and you need to be called out on that, I'm afraid. So those are my comments at the moment. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Cox. A couple of questions there about protecting current generation, and in particular the high needs block and the issues that not just we but all of the councils face. So I'll ask the leader to draw those questions and answer those questions in his closing. Very much trying to keep this on questions rather than speeches. So I've got two other non-cabinet members indicating with questions of their own. Councillor Dedman, I'll bring you first in for your questions.
Yes, hello, good morning. Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I've only got one question, really, which was about the beach huts plan, which I do hear is not selling but keeping, which I'm just asking the leader, or indeed whoever is in charge of this, why they haven't informed the beach hut associations of what they plan, because now this is in the public domain. The associations are very concerned, and I know the leader has said, well, there'll be no change. Well, I think the beach hut associations feel they will, and I don't think that this is a very good way to treat a lot of people who are very, very concerned, and they are residents, most of them. I know some of them are from further afield. So that's one question. Why have they not been informed, let alone consulted? And the other point is just to pick up on what I'm not quite sure which councillor said this, but that Christchurch residents will be so much better off with this plan. I just want to, again, go back on this old chestnut, whether it can be denied that harmonisation for Christchurch was initially in the papers, which I still have from goodness knows when. I can't remember how long ago this was all started by Price Waterhouse, whatever, PwC. We had endless papers on it, and in those initial papers, which I'm sure the leader and the deputy leader and the cabinet have all seen, harmonisation could have been over 20 years, and that the Conservative government and the Conservative administrations were quite happy with. And then, with a lot of argumentation and resistance from the Christchurch Borough councillors, this harmonisation, when we went into LGR, was brought down to 7 years. And I think I'm getting my figures right. I'm sure the leader will tell me if I'm not. So without the Christchurch independents, who split off from that administration in Christchurch for this reason, Christchurch would have been paying a huge amount more under the Conservative administration. So it's really only the independents who stood for Christchurch who achieved this wonderful tax levelling off. And I know that in Poole, there are a lot of councillors and residents who are very bitter that they have had to pay a lot more because Christchurch are paying a lot less. And that was totally down to the Christchurch independence. And I don't like to get political about these things, but I do notice that the Cabinet is very political. So I would like that question answered, that can the leader or the deputy leader agree that harmonisation was only going to be over 7 years, and it was within the previous administration that it was brought down to everybody paying the same at this point. Thank you.
Thank you very much for those two questions, Councillor Dedman. I believe Councillor Dunlop in her remarks may talk a little bit more around the beach hut engagement that will surely happen going forward, and I'm or somebody else can talk about this. An absolute commitment, clearly we're going to do that. And secondly, again, we will address the comments on council tax. Pleased to see that you're happy that Christchurch residents have more in their pocket, and hopefully, therefore, you'll be accepting our proposed council tax freeze at the budget to make sure that it stays in their pockets if we're so keen on that. I'll move to the final person that's indicated outside of Cabinet, which is Councillor Mark Howell, for any questions that you may have. Councillor Howell.
Thank you, Chair. Firstly, I'd like to correct one of the other untruths that keeps getting repeated and has been repeated again by the leader today, with his reference to that the Unity Alliance making a fire sale of assets. This is just not true. If he's got any evidence that, he should bring it forward. He normally brings up the Poole Civic Centre, but we never brought forward any proposals to council in relation to the civic centre, and certainly I would never have approved of any disposal of the civic part of the civic centre. So it'll be interesting in the course of time to see what this administration does propose to happen with that civic centre. But in general, where if you've got evidence of a fire sale, actually bring it forward. Now my questions relate to the beach huts. We in a situation, and the leader said that this would not compromise the interests of residents, but actually it will. The proposal will deny residents, taxpayers in this area, of income from the beach huts of approximately £5 million a year for 19 years. From next year, and that money is being brought forward, take away all the costs of financing its administration, etc., and being applied to administration, a process that, to all intents and purposes from the outside, seems to be in trouble. It's taking longer to deliver, and it's more expensive to deliver.
Could I ask you for a question there, Councillor Howell? If there's a question in there, we're supposed to be focusing on questions.
My question relates to the KPMG report that was mentioned by Councillor Cox earlier. The whole proposal of going down the flexible use of capital receipts line was actually proposed, as I understand it, in this KPMG report, and it says in the budget papers that report was the basis. We haven't seen that report as councillors, and I understand it's a draft report. This opens up two questions. First question is, should the council be launching such a proposal and approach which the councillor himself, the leader himself, accepts is bold and innovative? Should we be launching into such an exercise on the basis of a draft report that we presumably cannot rely upon because of qualifications made in that report by KPMG? And the second question is, will the leader release that report to councillors so we can properly assess its contents? Otherwise we are being asked as councillors in the budget to approve something on the basis of, pursue something that is going to potentially affect the council's budget in the sum of over £50 million without having the proper information at hand. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Howell. I'll ask you answer a number of those questions in his summing up at the end. But before I do that, I'll move on to any other Cabinet members, either virtually or present today, whether there's anything else that they wish to comment or ask on the paper and the proposals in front of us. Councillor Dunlop.
Thank you, Chairman. Okay, that was interesting.
Apologies, we had some audio issues.
Right, that
resolved.
wasn't me singing in my dulcet brummy tones. I think I'd like to actually respond to something that Councillor Dedman said about the Cabinet being very political. I think we've just heard the usual litany of hyperbole from Councillor Cox, which includes him disparaging a number of people, including the Chief Finance Officer and KPMG. So I think that, when we're talking about political, this is the kind of thing we hear from Councillor Cox, rather than coming up with some imaginative solutions as to how he might deal with it, an alternative way to deal with some of these service pressures. And we've all heard those allegations and personal accusations in council and in meetings from Councillor Cox. However, moving on to the paper before us, to me, this whole budget underpins those three themes that are central to our big plan, which is children, community and culture. And those are the standout things for me. Over the last 15 years that I've been a councillor, I've spent 10 of those as part of services. And I'm really familiar with the pressures that they face, the difficulties and the demands of vulnerable children. And any of the portfolio holders that have had that will know that I push very hard and I scrutinise very hard to make sure that those vulnerable children are taken care of. And that's exactly what we're doing here. We're putting this over 12 million into it this year. We've put money in last year and we're making a statement about that. In terms of community, how we value our people, and more importantly, how we take care of the vulnerable and those who don't have the advantages that many have and are marginalised in many ways, makes a statement about who we are. And once again, we are making that statement about how important it is to us that vulnerable people are taken care of. And finally, culture. I mean, I could talk for England about culture. I think everyone knows that. And the importance of culture and people engaging in culture and participation, creating it, developing it, and having that on the doorstep can never be underestimated. And I think everyone pretty much knows I'm on a mission to connect people through culture. And to me, this is a people's budget. It's very clear about who we value. We're going to put our money where our mouth is, and we're going to pursue this to make a real difference to the lives of people in BCP. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dunlop. And you've never mentioned culture before, so this is the first time hearing it from you, but absolute passion of yours, and rightly so. Councillor Mike Green.
Thank you, Chairman. I'd also just like to comment quickly on the speech that came from Councillor Dedman. She continues to talk repeatedly about the council tax levels and the effect, particularly that have come from the role of the Christchurch Independents. And I do think it's important that we look at that, because there was a plan originally that the council tax for Christchurch, Bournemouth and Poole would be equalised over the course of 7 years. And there is no doubt that the influence of members from Christchurch assisted in us getting to what I believe, and I think all of us around the table believe, was the right answer, which was to equalise it much, much quicker than that. And that wasn't just the Christchurch Independents. It included the Conservative members of BCP Council who are elected to represent Christchurch wards, and indeed even the Liberal Democrat member who was elected within a Christchurch ward to represent as a BCP councillor. And this was recognised again by Councillor Mellor in his first speech, in fact, when speaking about the budget, when he put his hands up and said, you know what, I think they're right. So let's all get together and get it on that council tax to get that harmonisation there quickly. Indeed, I have every belief that if the Christchurch Independents had remained in the party that they were in, we would have got there far quicker and with far, far less fuss. But we did, and we've moved on there. I think the important thing, though, when we look at the aims of those that were elected as Christchurch Independents and the others, is what the real difference would have made to the council tax payer in Christchurch. There were two options. One was to go along with local government reform and form Bournemouth Christchurch Pool Council. The other one, the one that was favoured by the Christchurch Independents, and I haven't heard them yet put their hands up and say, we were wrong about this, was not to go forward with that, in which case they would have remained part of Dorset Council. And let's go back to what was pointed out by the Deputy Leader right at the beginning of this. That would mean that by the end of this council period next year, council taxpayers in Christchurch would, on average, even for a band D, and there are some bands that are higher than that, would be £1,000 worse off than they are because LGR had taken place. I remember in one of Councillor Mellor's speeches, again, it may be that same one, he started talking about the old boar in the corner of the pub, still trying to fight old battles, and hoping that Christchurch Independents wouldn't come out like that. Well, I think now that choice is there. As we're coming up towards the last year of this BCP Council, isn't it time to go, Christchurch Independents, you know what, we were wrong about it. BCP was a good idea. It saved our council taxpayers £1,000 each. Let's get on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Any other Cabinet members wishing to speak on this item? Councillor Iyengar.
Yes, thank you, Chair. There's 3 points I'd like to make in response to the questions that have been raised. First one is there was the mention of risk. I don't think there's any council up and down the country as we head towards the next fiscal who has no risk in their budget or no assumptions given the enormous certainty that's going on. So I think to talk about the fact that there is risk in this budget is really quite a the discussion has moved well beyond that. And I think the genuine discussion is about how big that risk is and how it's being managed. And I think the leaders made a very good expose about how it is being managed. The second thing is, and just let me repeat in case it's not lost, is this thing about the £11 million, which is, had the full council tax been taken last year and in this budget that's been proposed, it would have been a burden on residents of 11 million higher than it will have actually been. That's 11 million pounds in effect not taken from residents, and I think that is significant. And the other point about the risk is about the debt profile. And again, as the leader said, BCP has been in the lower quartile nationally of this with no queries whatsoever. This takes us to still just slightly less than the middle. So I think it's, I'd say it's almost amounted to a cheap shot to say that what we're doing here is in any way not prudent. The second point I'd make is a smaller one, but alluding to something Councillor Howell said about the pool civic space. And I think his comment was he would never approve a sale of the civic area, the heritage area of the civic space. Well, let's just be clear that that's not been contemplated anyway and never was in the proposals that are being brought forward. So let's just be clear on that one. That's not a divide between any group of councillors. That has been resolutely the proposal from the cross-party working group, which I'm sure Councillor Howell is well aware of. And the third thing is, as we sit here today, no alternative budget has been proposed. So councillors are here, we're elected to come up with, to manage risk, but to come up with solutions, come up with the way forward for BCP, for our businesses, and most importantly, for our residents. No alternative budget has been suggested, no solutions, only criticisms from the opposition. We're proposing solutions, we're managing the risk. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Iyengar. I have one final Cabinet member wishing to speak, Councillor Karen Rampton. Karen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. As everybody knows, adult social care always forms a major part of the budget. And so I'm really welcoming that additional 12.1 million investment in adult social care, because we have to protect and we have to invest in our frontline services, and that will allow us to keep pace with the growth and demand and to uplift costs. I mean, as we know, we've got rising demographic needs and growth, particularly in our learning disability and our mental health groups, and also growth and demand for care packages for people with long-term conditions. Care packages have gone up. They're about a third more expensive than they were pre-COVID. And for people who are coming out of hospital, and we know that we have this pressure on us to get people out of hospital and into a different setting, but we're experiencing a longer term cost burden, much beyond the discharge period, because not all our clients, our customers, can reach full independence after discharge. So I really welcome investment, and I also just wanted to say that I really welcome the commitment that this administration has made in terms of the development of our care technology offer, and because that, along with re-ablement, is still very important to our residents' health and independence, and of course the other bit is about that preventative work that we're doing, and my colleague Councillor Iyengar on the topic health will agree with me, I'm sure, that unplanned admissions are absolutely key to stopping that circle of people going into hospital, coming out, needing packages of care, which not only cost a great deal of money to us and to the person, but also limits their ability to regain independence. So I welcome this budget, and I absolutely will be supporting it. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rampton. I'll now pass back to the leader to sum up and answer any of the points that he wishes to that have been raised. Thank you, Councillor Mellor.
Thank you very much, Jared. Thank you for colleagues for the debate and discussion as well. Really helpful. There's a number of points, so let me go back through some of them. Thank you very much, Councillor Cox, for your points. One thing I'll start on in that is I think we've been accused of being political and being like Boris Johnson. Let's get back to the facts around climate. This is a real climate budget. It's really important. What we've done and what we're standing in front of. The facts are, whether it was deferred or got rid of, that is cash money, not in somebody's pockets. If your salary has been deferred, somebody comes to you at the end of the month and said, "I'm deferring your salary, but that's fine. I'm not got rid of it." You haven't got money in the bank to pay your mortgage, and that's entirely what the Unity Alliance did. So they did take out £240,000 from investment in climate ecological emergency. That is a fact. What have we done? We put it back. We've doubled it. We've made it permanent, and we've added a £20 million facility. It means that we've actually got the opportunity to genuinely invest and be one of the leading authorities, leading places in the country around climate and sustainability. I'm very proud of that. I'll stand in front of that absolutely every day of the week, and I'm sure Cabinet colleagues will as well. We heard also about risk, and I think it's poor behaviour from a fellow councillor to effectively, bring the council's professional officers and their judgment in terms of risk into this discussion. I think Councillor Iyengar was absolutely right. Proposing solutions, managing risk, absolutely. My view is there's a significant more risk in selling off all of our assets. We look to what we're trying to deliver for future generations, and this is a budget for now and for future future generations. So I'll come back to Councillor Cox on an area where I believe he was incorrect. Was around saying the £50 million, of money raised through the Beach Hut transaction. What that delivers, every penny of that, not a penny of that, can get spent on anything other than transformation. And what that transformation programme does is provide £50 million a year, every year, of savings to our council taxpayers. So it's got a payback period of 1 year, effectively. Over the lifetime of that £50 million investment, about 20 years, there's £1 billion worth of payback. £50 million a year for 20 years is £1 billion a year's worth of payback. So you talk about being, disingenuous with future generations. Your numbers just don't stack up, and then you go on to criticise, big four accountancy firms like KPMG, and there's probably reasons why you do that. Okay, I'm not going to get too much more, into council. We disagreed in the past. We disagree again. I think our records are quite clear, actually. In terms of looking at the investment we're doing, the people's budget that we're invested in, the fact that we're using our assets now and stopping selling them to provide for future generations. If we look at what under Councillor Cox, the previous administration, looked to try and do in last year's alternative budget. They wanted a council culture. They wanted a council regeneration. They've historically, tried to get out of the improvements in CSAS officers that we put in place. They voted, appallingly against the £1 million, Futures Children's Catch-Up Fund that we thought was so important as our children were coming out of COVID. So if we look at records, what have you got? You've got an administration, and my colleagues sat here today, which I'm thankful for, standing in front of delivering for our communities, delivering, those people budgets. We've heard talk before of Section 114 notice when Councillor Cox failed to get an amendment through overview and scrutiny on it before, when he'd asked this administration to cancel all spending effectively about 6 months ago. And now we looked at, and we've actually delivered a budget surplus. So go for one point, the chief exec even had to intervene and to say that this man was wrong and it was not a right amendment to do, in terms of to stop spending any future money, and his amendment wasn't in the best interest of his council. I think that tells you all you need to know, and I'd rather not dwell on him too much further. Thank you very much to Councillor Devlin and to Councillor Howe, which I'll come on to now. And also thanks to Councillor Green for your synopsis around harmonisation. Firstly, we'll say, of course, we'll consult in detail and engage with Beach Hut owners. We will absolutely do that as and when we're bringing something through that will enact what's in this budget, and that will be at some point in the next 12 months. When we've got a clear plan and a clear understanding, what we're looking to do is to use our assets effectively, and the option in front of us is around beach huts. As and when that progresses, we'll get that through a council paper. We'll go through overview and scrutiny. It comes to cabinet, it comes to full council, and in that, all the detail will be made available. And where do I think, once we actually sit down, if this moves forward as we expect it to, where I think this will sit with beach hut owners is fantastically well, because this is about saying nothing changes in terms of the control over the huts or the decision making around what the future prices might be, etc. But what we have got is an opportunity to bring more cash to more capital money to the table, to bring to increase investment in them, to bring other services if people want them. Effectively, we're often heard that there isn't parity across the seafront. Well, in terms of previous authorities, well, we now have some money to invest in this. So I'm absolutely confident when we get down to the detail and speaking with beach hut owners, this is a win-win for them, absolutely. And also, they're going to have more money to spend on beach huts because we've saved £11 million of their money, and the vast majority of beach hut owners are residents, local families, and it absolutely will remain the case. I feel quite passionate about Councillor Dedman's point on harmonisation, and I think Councillor Green was right. It's quite clear the Christchurch Independents didn't want local government reorganisation. Absolutely fine. That's absolutely fine. They've stood on that. And it's also quite clear now that that policy would have cost their council taxpayers £1,000 a year. So we're going to, £1,000 a term, so £260 a year. effectively, which is fine. If that's what you want to choose and the electorate wanted to choose that, then you know, then fine. But you know, they cannot keep saying that they've actually saved people money. What they claim for, you know, what they pushed for, you know, was not to have LGR. LGR will save £1,000 over a course of a term, and it will continue to save money. And in my understanding, my expectation is that that gap will increase as well, because we're going to continue to be a low council tax administration, you know, and we can see the gap now in terms of you know, what council tax in BCP is and what council tax in Dorset is. We talk a bit about the harmonisation as well. You know, I talked passionately at the time, you know, before LGR, about trying to deliver 3 years, you know, council tax harmonisation. And then one of in the first budget my administration brings forward is harmonisation after 2 years. So the facts again are, I was speaking in the when I was on the joint committee about 3-year harmonisation, and my administration has delivered 2-year harmonisation. And an interesting fact, that 2-year harmonisation was not voted for by the Budget Independents, didn't vote for council tax harmonisation. Councillor Dedman also talked about Paul. Paul has always had the lowest council tax in Dorset, and they're now having the benefit of our council tax freeze. Paul still does have the lowest council tax in Dorset because BCP Council has the lowest council tax in Dorset. So that's something again I'm proud of. Councillor Howell, untruths, I think, was the word you used, which is interesting language, isn't it, really, and probably not quite appropriate. The question is, you know, so how was the previous administration going to fund? How was your administration going to fund transformation? Well, it's through, you know, through capital receipts. And what's your interpretation of capital receipts? Selling buildings. You said, you know, can I prove it? You know, but when I inherited the transformation paper around the Poole Civic Centre, I took the word disposal out of that paper north of 10 times. I inherited a paper from your previous administration that said disposal of the Poole Civic Centre, and I changed that north of 10 times. That paper will be there. Yeah. So, and also you talk about, you know, we will deliver, you know, the £50 million of money which we will then not have to spend going forwards, the £5 million a year. But what you fail to notice is this £5 million a year going forward, the £54 million we get up front, is primarily just deploying future money now to deliver a £50 million a year every year saving. So what this does do, it might take, you know, it's actually the net effect is around about 3 million. It takes 3 million of future income to deliver a £50 million a year every year saving. You look, it's just basic, simple maths. And what it also does, it adds in, because we're able to go further and be more ambitious about the transformation programme, it adds in an extra £7 or £8 million in terms of year 4 transformation every year. So immediately you're taking a £3 million, you know, income stream, and you're making it into a, you know, £7 or £8 million extra income stream after year 4 every year. So the numbers just don't add up. You know, basically, we've got a previous administration who failed. You know, they failed to deliver, they failed to invest, they failed to come up with any solutions, any credible solutions around, you know, how they can invest in our place, how they can have ambition for our place. And, you know, all we hear now is previous portfolio holders coming in and trying to, you know, rewrite the history. We're going to write the history in terms of what we're doing now. And that absolutely is around, you know, investing in our services, investing in our people, record investment. Never before have we invested £25 million across our people's services, whilst on top of that, still funding culture, still funding Festival Coast Live, still funding regeneration, still funding our big plan. You know, we absolutely and doing this whilst not selling any of our assets as well. So, and of course, any of the papers will come forward as and when you know, we go through the full process. So as and when, you know, we've got the we're taking this through the council. Any background papers will be available as appropriate there. So, you know, yeah, I mean, I think to be honest, Chair, I could talk for quite a long time about this. We have clear blue water, don't we? And I'm glad it is blue water between what, you know, our low tax, high investment, low debt, high reserves administration, and what you have as a unity alliance that just failed to deliver for residents of BCP. So I'll probably stop there, Chair, if I may.
Thank Thank you very much, Leader, and we all feel your passion, and I think we're all equally excited about it at this end of the kind of virtual sphere as well. Colleagues in the room, we've had the debate. We'll now move this forward to a vote. This is a recommendation that will be going from Cabinet to Council. I will avoid reading all of the recommendations, but we have 1A through D. Yeah, including, I just noticed actually on the recommendation, there are 2 Ds. So I think that last recommendation should be an E, the one that begins at the Chief Finance Officer provides Council with a schedule setting out, etc. So 1A through E. And before I do move that to the vote, I know we've said it before, but I think it's worth, on behalf of all of Cabinet, indeed all of Council, once again underlying the Herculean effort that's gone in via our officer team, particularly in the finance area, in preparing this budget. It's difficult at the best of times. We're pushing the envelope here, record investment, and really bold ways to make sure that, as the leader has pointed out, we maintain as many of our assets as possible. And that's only been possible through to the real hard work of Adam Richards and his team. So thank you again for the absolute effort that's gone into this. It cannot be understated. So colleagues, we've had this recommendation proposed and seconded. All those in favour? And that is unanimous. Thank you very much all, and thank you to colleagues from across the council for the debate. We'll now move on to item number 8, which is the 21-22 budget monitoring at Q3. I will formally propose that. I believe Councillor Iyengar is happy to second. So again, I'll defer to the leader to introduce this item. Councillor Mellor.
Thank you, Chair. And in the light of how long I spoke on the last item, I'll be much briefer in this. Look, there's a really significantly good news story here. We've moved forward materially from a position of difficulty earlier on in the year. We still have a large overspend in our priority areas around particularly around children. We've decided to keep investing in those areas, and it primarily is COVID impact that has kept that cost up. We've been able to still do that, but move towards what looks like a budget surplus. And so we've been able to manage that, and you'll see the detail in the report. So very happy with the direction of travel of this paper. I think it gives us great confidence about our financial sustainability and fiscal management. Probably worth noting, Chair, the 2 recommendations. We've got a set of capital vehements in paragraph 78. And effectively, we're requesting that Council will approve these as set out in paragraph 79. So very happy to put that forward and take any questions as we see fit.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mellor. I don't believe we have any recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board for this one. Do I have any members not on the Cabinet wishing to speak? I'm not seeing any hands being raised. And Cabinet colleagues, either virtually or in the room, any other comments? I think the leaders pretty much summed that up. In which case we have, as highlighted, 2 recommendations in front of us, one for us to approve and the second to request Council to improve the capital vehements set out in paragraph 79. So I believe we are, Cora, I think one of our members had to step out quickly. Yeah, for those in the room, all of those in favour? Brilliant. That is unanimous for those present. Thank you very much. For that, we'll now move on to item number 9, which is the HRA Housing Revenue Account Budget Setting 22-23. I'll go to Councillor Rampton, who is going to propose this, and I'll be seconding it. Councillor Rampton, for your introduction.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, I think I'm losing my voice. I'm really happy to be presenting the Housing Revenue Account Budget Setting Report for 22-23. This is a familiar paper to colleagues. It comes to Cabinet and Council every February. So just a bit of background, the HRA Housing Revenue Account is a separate account from the General Fund, which ring fences the income and the expenditure associated with the Council's homes in Bournemouth and Poole. And this report seeks approval for the proposed budget and the proposals for rent, service charges and other charges to tenants and the plans for expenditure for 22-23. We have approximately 9,500 rented properties across neighbourhoods, 1,100 leasehold and 33 low-cost ownership property with a combined rent roll of 40 5 million in 22-23. Members will remember there is no council housing stock in Christchurch, as this was transferred to a housing association some years ago, but that's not to say that we couldn't in future deliver some council housing in Christchurch. So the council can only have one HRA, but it continues to maintain 2 separate neighbourhood accounts for now, and that's as agreed with government. This allows it to manage the services provided in each neighbourhood. Some of the accountancy policies have been aligned, such as the level of balances and bad debt provision. Borrowing decisions are taken based on the financial requirements of the HRA as a whole. This year, the accounts for the HRA have been presented as one. In 2020, lifted the HRA borrowing cap, and so the BCP HRA is not subject to a limit on borrowing. However, the borrowing must be affordable and must be prudent. Additional borrowing by the HRA is forecast for in 22-23 is forecast at 29 million. You will note the HRA major capital project plan spend in Appendix 6. This includes developments approved as CNAS and indicative budgets for the major projects to develop housing at Hillbourne and Oakdale, which will be subject to further approval. A review of our housing management service is well underway, and it's being overseen by a councillor working group with support from an independent consultant. A robust consultation with residents has ended, and there is support for the preferred option, which is to create a new service which combines the best of both worlds from our in-house model in Bournemouth and our Almo in Poole. There are ongoing regular meetings with the joint resident group who represent tenants and leaseholders across the Bournemouth and Poole neighbourhoods, and their feedback is very much taken into account, and their views and the views from the wider consultation will be used to help design the proposed new service and the ongoing governance of the service, and full council approval for this will be sought in April this year. Delivering new affordable homes and maintaining and improving our existing stock is a key priority, and work is ongoing to look across our client groups and to consider carefully how the needs of our residents on the register can best be met. This will include innovative building solutions and repurposing of existing stock. As an example, some of our shelter stock has previously been repurposed as much needed general needs. There are several national policies which will have a significant impact on the HRA over the next few years. And I believe I did mention these in a previous Cabinet report on compliance. But just to reiterate, the white paper, this is the Charter for Social Housing Residents. This is to create stronger regulation from the Regulator of Social Housing with new consumer standards, routine inspections and new tenant satisfaction measures. There's expectation on us that we will engage in co-design services with residents, a stronger emphasis on complaint handling and creating neighbourhoods that our residents want to live in. It's challenging, but so much of these new duties fit neatly with our connected communities, assets and strengths-based approach and the values that we hold dear in this administration. The Building Safety Bill following Grenfell in 2017, this will strengthen the regulatory systems for building safety. There will be a new regime which will govern design, construction and occupation of higher risk buildings, and there will be new obligations on this council to manage safety in occupied high-rise buildings. Environment, we will need to retrofit our homes to make them more energy efficient and to reduce carbon emissions. As we know from our ambitious passive house standard new builds we are delivering, the bonus to residents can be very low energy bills. We're developing a sustainability strategy to meet the challenges of the energy saving measures which we need to implement across our council homes. An additional funding of 1 million will be provided in 22-23 to kickstart this work. Digital switchover. The UK telecom structure will switch over to digital from analogue by 2025. We're already looking at how we provide tech-enabled care in our sheltered and our supported living stock. We want older residents and, of course, younger people with disabilities to access tech, which increases their independence and reduces isolation and loneliness. We'll need to replace our lifeline schemes as future emergency alarms need to connect digitally. City Fibre will allow digital connectivity through the installation of fibre to our council-owned properties, and we'll have that ability to supply faster services to help our residents who need care and support. The HRA delivers against a number of corporate objectives: new homes, energy efficient measures, and engagement with residents, to name just a few. The vast majority of income to the HRA is from rents and service charges to tenants and leaseholders. This income can only be spent on services to residents, on the management of their homes, and on the provision of new homes for our future tenants and leaseholders. It's important this level of income is maintained and maximised to support our 30-year plan. We need new homes for our residents, and the development of homes within the HRA will help our council priority to deliver at least 1,000 homes of mixed tenure in 5 years. I mentioned earlier the review of housing management and the way residents from both neighbourhoods are involved, and this will genuinely continue in a new service, once given approval, of course, with residents' input and engagement, with communications, with tackling antisocial behaviour, with property maintenance, and with services which tackle poverty, loneliness, and co-production into how their neighbourhood should look and feel. I really want to see younger people involved in the management of their homes so they get the right start in life in the right accommodation and are truly proud of where they live and their neighbourhood. The strategic objectives of the HRA are as previously: to deliver strong financial management, maximising the ability to collect income, to gain efficiencies and to service debt; to ensure our HRA stock is maintained to fulfil Council's legal obligations to ensure health, safety and welfare of residents and sustainability to meet climate emergency targets; effective housing management services, and to continue to secure funding opportunities to deliver additional affordable housing. The HRA budget setting focuses on 3 key areas for 22-23. The revenue income expected and the proposal are around rent and service charge levels for tenants and leaseholders. Revenue expenditure plans, including revenue contributions to capital and capital expenditure plans, and you'll note the financial summaries for this in appendices 1 to 6. I'm moving on to the key recommendations of the report. That dwelling rents increase by 4.1%, which is the formula of CPI plus 1% from April, and this is in line with DLUHC policy statement on rents. In 2015 budget statement, all social rents had to decrease by 1% per year from 1617 to 1920. The formula of CPI plus 1% was reintroduced in 2020, and that's helpful, as our rental income had reduced by 6 million during the reduction years. We're in line with other local authorities on this proposed increase. Approximately 68% of our tenants are in receipt of housing benefit or universal credit, which help with housing costs. So this is approximately, across the piece, an average increase of less than £4 per week. And that's in comparison to a property in the private sector, which is considerably higher at around £155 a week for a 1-bed. If the increase were not to be applied, this would reduce the HRA balance by between 4 million and 7.6 million, and that would inevitably affect our delivery of new homes. Second key recommendation, that garage rents are increased by 4.1%. Garage rents have been benchmarked, and we are similar to other councils, and of course we are cheaper than the private sector. That leaseholder services are charged in line with actual costs incurred. That the changes to service charges are agreed as set out in Appendix 2. Our residents pay a service charge for items such as heating, communal power, gardening and cleaning. There are differences in these charges levied between the 2 neighbourhoods, and these need to be and will be aligned. But that will be after consultation with residents and ensuring that the charges are reasonable before any changes are made. So this will not be immediate, and it will take some time to implement. An increase of 22.6% has been applied to service charges for communal heating and power. This reflects the increases in energy costs, but is capped to the level of increase over the last year in the amount paid under the price cap. Communal heating systems provide heating to residents' homes, while the communal power is for the electricity in communal areas only. So this proposal partially protects residents from the huge energy price increases we've all been hearing about, around 50%, and in some cases there's a 200% increase being passed on. However, it does mean a loss to the HRA on approximately £120,000 worth of income, as we are absorbing some of this impact to support our more vulnerable residents. I'd just like to add here that although we don't own the housing stock in Christchurch, Sovereign, who do manage it, will also be mitigating the full impact of the utility increase costs. There are good support networks for anyone who's worried about paying their rent through winter fuel payments and the Household Support Fund administered by Citizen Device. PHP, Pool Housing Partnership tenants, can access the Your Money team, and the Council has a financial inclusion team. Capital budgets are set using the following principles. Planned maintenance programme. The HRA supports several corporate objectives, and the planned maintenance programme sets out how the Council will spend up to £15 million improving our homes. This includes the £1 million I mentioned earlier to kickstart our energy efficiency measures, hopefully with some grant subsidies. And then we'll deliver work to ensure we get the best for our residents. The major capital programme as set out in Appendix 6 Appendix 6 sets out how 48 million will be spent providing new homes and other major projects such as Project Admiral in Poole and the 22 new homes at Cynthia House. Delivery plans for each neighbourhood are in Appendices 7 and 8, and these set out the actions for 22-23. Subject to approval of the housing management model, the delivery plans for each neighbourhood will then align into one programme. So, Chair, I'd like to thank all the officers involved in compiling this excellent report. A great deal of hard work has gone into it, and I would be grateful for Cabinet approval of the recommendations as set out at A, Roman 1 to 7, B, Roman 1 and 2, and at C. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rampton, for proposing and also for the really comprehensive background to that. It's extremely important, and in particular, I think really helpful to see that kind of protection around the energy price situation as well. I think that's going to be really positively felt by a lot of our council house tenants. I'm absolutely happy to second it. As colleagues will know, in my portfolio, I have the capital delivery side of housing, and as Councillor Rampton has pointed out, Appendix 6 talks about I think it's a really ambitious programme we've got of delivering council houses, across particularly Poole and Bournemouth in the areas that we have control over the coming years. And I think when you look at that document, when you look back to what that means on the ground, there's a real variety as well of things that we're offering. Take Bournemouth, you've got with some immediacy the development coming forward from the Cabbage Patch development, not just being climate friendly, but as you pointed out, Councillor Rampton, really pushing the edges of what is possible for our climate agenda. And that's not just good because it's good to do for the planet, but also the real impact that has, having just been around to the new tenants moving into our Luckham House development. They've only moved in the last couple of weeks. The real saving that's making on the ground is absolutely transformative. We need to be really proud that we're able to achieve that. You then go on to the comprehensive development to Princess Road, a proper mixed-use scheme, and with an element of that protecting our most vulnerable as well. So looking after a whole host of different people. Moving over to the Poole area, particularly proud that we've just approved the development coming after some time at Herbert Avenue, which really focuses on those that find themselves in the position of being homeless and offering them not just accommodation but a path to some permanence. And again, that's I think going to be really positively felt by those that find themselves in that position. And then finally, another one to pick out, the recent planning approval that we've just obtained on the Hillbourne school site. And if you ever wanted to point to the development that offers proper affordable housing, that is one of them. So the plans are there, the funding is there, and I think this takes a real step forward to making that, to pushing that forward. So on that basis, delighted to second. I'll move over to see whether there are any comments from, I don't believe we had any recommendations from the Overview and Scrutiny Board. Not seeing any. Any comments from cabinet members, non-cabinet members? I've got Councillor Felicity Rice, who is in the room, that wishes to speak. Councillor Rice, would you like to come up to the microphone?
Great, thank you. I just wanted to ask a question about the £1 million for making social housing more carbon efficient. So it was really just to understand more about that. Obviously, it's an extremely difficult area to tackle. Our buildings weren't designed to be retrofitted necessarily. So all of the the older buildings that we have, it's going to be a challenge. And I know other areas have already been working on this for quite a long time. So it was really, and indeed, when I was a cabinet member, there was discussions started about that. And I know certainly Poor Housing Partnership have been really, really keen and are working on it. So it was really just whether you had more information about partners that you may be thinking that we could work with that have been doing research in the UK, such as Energy Sprung or something like that, or sort of more thoughts on how we would go about tackling this huge issue, any groups that are going to be set up or anything like that. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rice. Before I ask Karen to address that in her summing up, I'll move to any other councillors on the Cabinet, either virtually or physically, that wish to add anything or had any other further questions. I'm not seeing that, in which case I'll leave to you, Councillor Rampton, to sum up and address the points that Councillor Rice has raised.
Yes, thank you, Councillor Rice, for your...
I'm sorry, apologies. I saw a last-minute hand come up from Councillor Mike Green, who just got in there. So, Councillor Green, I'll come to you.
Right, thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I'm sure you just weren't shown it quick enough. No, it was really just to help out a bit with Councillor Rice's question. We now have an energy expert within the council's climate action team. That action team, as you know, is growing at the moment. We have our head of climate action. That will be expanded to a team now between 10 and 14, depending on exactly where we get to. But the one that we have already got in place is Pedro on energy, and he'll be working very closely on the council stock. But beyond that, it's not just the council housing stock, and we really welcome the money that's coming forward from the HRA to be able to look after that part of it. But there will also be the other leased buildings which are not part of the council's housing stock, which we're putting that together with. So there is a huge amount of work will be done. Councillor Rice is of course correct to say that these changes were not anticipated when the stock was built, but that doesn't mean that there aren't an awful lot of there isn't an awful lot of work that we can do on retrofit. As we know, there are two different targets that we're working towards carbon neutrality. The 2050 one is for BCP areas as a whole, although we hope to bring that forward, but the 2031 is an absolute hard and fast one for the council's own activities, and that includes the council housing. So it will be very much in our minds. So we welcome the £1 million as part of the HRA, but that doesn't mean that that's where it's all going to stop. And our experts will be looking into it. So I hope that helps.
Thank you, Councillor Green, for that explanation and assurance. Councillor Rampton, I'll pass to you to sum up and propose the recommendations.
Okay, yes, thank you, and thank you, Councillor Green, for your helpful comments. So, as I say, Councillor Rice, we have set aside this additional £1 million to invest in programmes as they're coming forward, as they're approved, and we're just waiting to see what's going to be announced in terms of grant subsidies. We've got a bit of a flavour of the direction of travel, and then we'll be delivering that work to get the most from local residents. So we spend about 14 million a year at the moment to maintain our homes, and a lot of that can be used to deliver carbon reduction. So, for example, if you're replacing a double glazed window, you're replacing a window, you can replace a double glazed window with a triple glazed window, which inevitably will cost more, but it's in line with our carbon reduction measures, and the cost will be higher, but it's going to save us money in the long term, as well as being good for our environment. So I hope that answers between the two of us. I hope that answers your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Chair, not really much more to say in terms of summing up. I would just commend the paper to Cabinet for approval. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Rampton. So we've got the recommendations in front of us. I'll move to Cabinet for the vote. All those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you, Councillor Rampton and the team for the excellent work there. Moving on to item number 10 in this very full cabinet, which is the Bus Operator Enhanced Partnership Plan and Scheme National Bus Strategy. I'm going to propose this. I believe Councillor Mark Anderson is formally seconding, and I will move to Councillor Mike Green to do an introduction. Thank you, Councillor Green.
Sorry. Sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Colleagues will recall that last year we approved the establishment of the Enhanced Partnership, which is basically a scaling up of the Quality Bus Partnership, which has been in place for almost 2 decades now, and placing it onto a legal footing. That allowed us to put together, a bus service improvement plan and submit that to the Department for Transport alongside our bid for funding, which would enable us to achieve the target, or we believe would enable us to achieve the targets that BSIP, the Bus Service Improvement Plan, identifies. The date on which we will have the results of that bid have been put back a couple of times, and we are now hopeful that it will come from the end of February, and we'll find out how much money we're being awarded towards our plans from government. And it's once we get that information, that's when we'll then be able to work out whether the BSIP can stay as it is, or whether it needs to get revised up or down, or whatever amendments need to be done, and that will be done with in cooperation with our bus service operator partners as we do that. However, it is a little bit circular, the whole thing, because the BSIP was put together with us and our partners. It's submitted towards the £3 billion fund that government has announced, but given the revision will have to take place as soon as we get that announcement, what we need to be able to do is to be able to convince government at this point that we have the political will to be able to push forward with it. We know that fund has been very considerably oversubscribed, so some local transport authorities are going to be happy and some are going to be very disappointed in what comes back from government. And so the reason for coming forward to Cabinet today is to seek approval for delegation, so that we can, this would then be delegated to myself in consultation with the Director for Transport and Engineering, and to be able to revise this with and put into place enhanced partnership plan and scheme with our bus operator partners in April, to be able to submit that through to government in time. So by having that delegated authority, it means that we've already gone through that part of the democratic process, and can assure the Department for Transport that if they do come forward with a decent award for us, it is going to receive the support it needs and be used in line with the bus service improvement plan that they've already had from us. So that's the reason for coming forward with it today. So apologies that it's all a little bit muddled up, but hopefully that gives some explanation as to the order of things.
Thank you very much for that introduction, Councillor Green. I'll move now to Councillor Bartlett. I don't believe there are any formal recommendations from the ONS board, but I believe you have a question or comment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, we don't have any specific recommendations, but I am sort of obliged to give a flavour for some of the main points that are brought out from the discussion that we have at the board. And on this particular subject, we recognise the imperative at present was to get the bid submitted to the DFT, and with that understanding, the board are fairly content with the paper. But there were a couple of issues that were raised that when the plan is refined, and I think the intention is that it probably will be refined progressively, that the following points are taken on board. And one of the key issues was about pricing and the affordability of buses to families in particular. and coupled with that, the lack of incentivisation to use the buses. And an example of that was the travel card, which has currently got a 20% premium on it, which is hardly any incentive to use the buses. If to buy a travel card, it costs you 20% more than regular fare. So that's an example of it. Another one of the issues is about the interconnectability and the lack of direct routing of buses to particularly areas like the town centre of Poole. So those are just a couple of the key issues that were raised during the debate, which I think the portfolio holder acknowledged at the time, and a kind of a commitment that as the programme is refined or the plan is refined, those sort of issues will be taken into account. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bartlett, for that flavour from Overview and Scrutiny. I'll now move to colleagues that are not on the Cabinet that may wish to speak. Councillor Rice.
Thank you.
I'll let you.
Yes, well, it was more a comment, really. I suppose I just would like to express support for anything that improves bus infrastructure and for us to be as ambitious as possible. One specific comment would be around enabling councillors in the future to understand, with regards to Councillor Bartlett's point on the cost of bus journeys, in the future, over the next year, we as a council could look at the cost of travelling by car and all of the implications in terms of parking and how long for and how many people you can fit in it, and the cost of using a bus. I think that would be really, really helpful for councillors to understand why we've ended up with an area that people are using cars rather than buses. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Councillor Rice. And I'll leave Councillor Green in his summing up to address as he feels appropriate. Any other colleagues on the Cabinet, virtually or physically, wish to comment? Councillor Iyengar.
So only a quick comment in support of the paper. Just I think the comments made just prior to this on the pricing, the routing, the incentives, and so on. I think they're all well made, and I support them, particularly from the sort of the active health side of things and making people more active. But I think this paper is particularly looking for a sort of a just help to enable us to take advantage of the enhanced partnership and mindful of the timescales that are being imposed on us. So full support for this, and then the broader discussion, I think the portfolio will agree, will ensue after this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Iyengar, and I share that support informally for proposing as well, and I think it's absolutely vital that within the recommendation that we've got the delegated authority to Director of Transport and Engineering in consultation with the portfolio holder to act quickly, because we have to remain fleet of foot on this, as Councillor Green has explained, and I think that's perfectly acceptable. So any final comments, Councillor Green, before we go to the vote?
Yes, thank you. If I could just to address the points that have come up. The bus service improvement plan itself was included as an appendix, and it does contain a lot of information, particularly about the barriers that are there for people who, which are at the moment preventing them travelling by bus, and that does include pricing. It does include the incentivisation and cross ticketing, and Councillor Bartlett's absolutely right, as the Overview and Scrutiny Board brought up, to point out that the travel card costing 20% more than a return journey really is not an incentivisation, and that really goes to show why it is only used by 0.05% of those travelling by bus. It really is not fit for purpose. What the enhanced partnership will do is give us a much greater say and an ability to work with our partners towards getting a bus service which is more attractive for all. The interconnectability is another one of those barriers, or as it's down there within the report, is how many changes you need to make before you actually get to somewhere. And that is identified as another barrier, as indeed is the alternative, as Councillor Wright has pointed out, of being able to travel by car cheaply and to be able to park generally for free in the town centres, and that is recognised as a barrier for people to come on. Within the report, you'll see that there is a division, or it looks at two parts of it: those that are barriers for people who don't use a bus at the moment, and those who are barriers to increased bus use by those that do. And about 60% of people do use a bus occasionally. And it looks as though there is more chance of improvement and more modal shift in concentrating on that latter set. But the former set also needs to be looked at. And there are areas within this that we will want to prioritise. And the only reason I'd just like to bring that up is because it will affect a lot of what we do as far as transport is concerned. And there will be political discussions to be held and political decisions to be made. One of them will be around bus priority and being able to speed up the bus routes. The rule of thumb, which is very well accepted, is that for every 1% faster that buses go, there is a 1% increase in the patronage. And this BCP is looking for a 10% increase in bus speeds. When we're looking at bus priority, we will need to look carefully at the amount of on-street parking, which is one of the main reasons that buses are being slowed down on certain routes. And there are political discussions to be made on those, and I think we're going to need to be brave on them. But similarly, there are political discussions to be made or decisions to be made, as Councillor Rice has indicated, on the fact that people can travel into the town centres by car, and in many cases, about 74%, I think it is, have free parking at their place of work. From a personal point of view, and from my personal politics, I would feel very reluctant to introduce charges for people who choose to drive into work and who choose to take advantage of the free parking that they are offered there. But that is something, as Councillor Rice has indicated, that really I think needs to be discussed. I would hope, as a Conservative administration, we would not go that route, but I do welcome the fact that there may be others in the council who have different views, and I would urge them to bring those forward as soon as they can. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green, for that summary. Colleagues, we've got the one recommendation in front of us for Cabinet to decide on. If I could, we've had it duly proposed and seconded. Could I take that to the vote? All those in favour? Fantastic, and that is unanimously agreed. Thank you, Councillor Green, and thank you, colleagues. We are nearly at the end. We have two more substantive items, but they're very important ones. So I'll move on to item number 11 now, which are the school admissions arrangements 23-24 for community and maintained schools. I'm intending to formally propose this, and I believe Councillor White, you're happy to formally second?
Yeah, happy to second that.
Great, thank you. In which case, I'll move on to Councillor Nicola Green, joining us virtually to introduce the item. Thank you, Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman, and congratulations for keeping track of all of us. And I'm very sorry that I can't be with you this morning. This paper, the first of my two, it deals with the school admissions arrangements for the academic year 2023 to 24 for BCP community and maintained schools, ensuring that the council meets its statutory duties to maintain sufficient school places. It follows on from a consultation paper which I brought to Cabinet late last year, and following on from that consultation, there are no further changes to the proposals contained therein. The change to the published admission number for Burton Primary School goes from 60 to 45 places at the request of the governors, and that's therefore confirmed in this paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Green, I'll move. We don't have the chair of the Children's Services Overview and Scrutiny Committee, and I believe it's built into the recommendations that they'll be looking at this. Are there any other colleagues outside the Cabinet that wish to speak on this item? Not seeing any hands, in which case I'll pass over to colleagues on Cabinet that may wish to speak. Nope, I think it's all pretty straightforward, in which case, colleagues, we've got a proposal duly proposed and seconded. It's to look at the two recommendations, A and B, and approve those. Could I ask all those in favour to raise their hands? Thank you very much. That is unanimous, and thank you for your brevity, Councillor Green. We'll move on to the final item, substantive item in the agenda, which is item number 12, the Mainstream Schools and Early Years Funding Formula 22-23. Again, I will propose this, and I believe Councillor Mike White is seconding again.
Yes, happy to second this, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Councillor White. And again, I'll move to Councillor Nicola Green for your introduction. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. And you won't be surprised that this will take a little longer. I would just like, before I start, to make a tiny amendment, if I may. It's there for the eagle-eyed in paragraph 18. And what that should read is that the brought forward deficit figure of, I think it's 8.7 million, was at April 2021, not at April 2020, as set out in the paper. So I'd be very grateful if Democratic Services could make sure that that's corrected ahead of these papers being published for Council. The paper itself sets out the way in which the Dedicated Schools Grant, which now totals £322 million, is to be distributed, complying with national requirements and local preferences within a prescribed financial envelope. The overall funding available comes directly from central government and covers most of the educational sector, funding mainstream schools to year 11, special schools and early years settings, as well as bespoke educational packages for children with special educational needs and disabilities, and some central functions required to support the education sector, including admissions. At first sight, an increase in spending of 23 million stands out as a significant sum, and it is indeed welcome. However, in recognising that this will have a positive impact in our mainstream schools, it does need to be considered in the wider context of the historic and ongoing deficit within our high needs block, which is part of the part of the grant which funds the needs of children and young people with education, health and care plans, some of which are very costly. In making their recommendations, the Schools Forum wanted to support the early years sector, recognising the huge positive impact that early diagnosis of a child's additional needs can have for that child, and indeed the negative outcome of undiagnosed need later on as a child passes through their school years. They further recognise the pressures which particularly face many of the providers within the sector, who are private, voluntary and independent organisations, and who don't have the ability to cross-subsidise with both staffing and expertise. Members are aware that considerable work is ongoing to address the challenges within the high needs block. BCP Council is not alone in feeling this pressure, and it's been a long-standing concern for the sector across the country, and the Local Government Association continue to lobby on behalf of councils. Our local approach this year has been to establish a high needs block recovery board, chaired by the Chief Executive, with a focus on reducing the deficit and the ongoing pressures by a variety of means. This dovetails with practice improvements and a wider sectoral partnership, with co-production with parents and carers at its heart, led by the SEND Improvement Board's independent chair. It links with the SEND investment cap approved by Council last year, which is being focused on the delivery of high quality school places for children and young people with additional needs in the heart of our community. We're very grateful for the expressions of interest we've received to develop ways of keeping our children within our existing schools and academies, limiting the number whose need can only be met by non-local provision. Evaluation is underway, and I look forward to bringing those developments forward in due course. Chairman, colleagues, thanks have already gone to the finance team for their work in preparing the suite of documents in front of us today, but I would like to add a specific work to the school's finance team led by Nicola Webb. They deal with a landscape of fine detail, where one tiny tweak of a formula, like one beat of a butterfly's wing, has a huge impact further down the line. The information very often comes from central government very late in the day, and yet it still needs consultation with the sector. And yet the team always managed to make it comprehensible within the larger context. And in closing, Chairman, if I may, I would like to pass on, as always, my thanks to the Schools Forum for their forensic understanding of the issues contained herein, and their determination always to ensure that the needs of our children and young people are at the forefront of any decision to do with funding. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Green. I will move to any colleagues that are not on Cabinet that may wish to speak on this item, if they wish to indicate now. I'm not seeing any, in which case I'll move to colleagues that are on Cabinet. Anybody have any points to add or any questions to ask of Councillor Green on this item? Again, I'm not seeing any, in which case thank you again to Councillor Green. Again, thank you, as you pointed out, to the finance team that have been working on this. Colleagues, we have a number of recommendations in front of us, which are for Cabinet to recommend to Council, A through D. Could I have those indicating that are in favour all raise? Thank you very much. Once again, that is unanimous. Thank you, Councillor Green, and thank you, colleagues, for that. I will now move to item number 13 on the agenda, which are urgent decisions taken by the Chief Executive in accordance with the Constitution. I don't believe there are any. Nope. In which case, I'll move on to the final item, which is item number 14, the Cabinet Forward Plan, which I believe is for noting or approval. Noting. Any comments from colleagues on the newly published Forward Plan? Nope. In which case, thank you, everyone. It's been quite an unusual day with a number of those joining virtually through to self-isolating, but I think it's worked very well regardless, and thank you all for your time, patience and input. I will now close the meeting. Have a good day.